And we're going to take the bottom case. We're going to slip the motherboard back in. Take out my trusty paintbrush here and just paint the dust off of the... It's just a bare paintbrush, never been touched by paint. And we're going to just take the dust off of the bottom case with the paintbrush. Okay, you want to make sure you get the motherboard lined up properly. And if you notice anything else on the motherboard that you need to do before you put it in, now's the time. And what I'm doing now is, as I was eyeing it up, I saw that there might be some metal in the bottom part of the case that might hit that wire that we just attached. So I'm going to take a piece of electrical tape, maybe two, and cover up the exposed wire that we just attached, just in case there's a ground point on the bottom part of the case that would hit it and cause a short circuit. So we're basically insulating the job we did. Now we have to do that sometimes because using the wire, because that's not what was originally in the machine, it might jut out a little bit and make contact with a piece of metal, you know, in the bottom case or somewhere else in the machine. Make sure you get it in exactly right. It should fit in exactly right. There shouldn't be any points that are forced upwards or bent. It should fit in perfectly. If it's not, find out why. Like for this example, there's a connector that's under there that needs to come up on the upper side of the motherboard rather than sitting on the underside of the motherboard. And once it's in there solidly, it's time to screw the screws back in. And remember, the screws go where the white arrows are. Okay, we're going to make sure all the screws are in. I'm just being very careful here. This is the point where you have to be careful. You're using all the original screws. So when you get the whole thing back together, you're not left with some stray screws, which has happened to me often in the beginning. Now I'm going to take more electrical tape and do the same thing to the underside of the motherboard as I did with the top part we did. Just cover up that contact point that we created. Just because with the wire there, it might be jutting out or popping out a little bit higher than was originally there with the original solder connection. So we just want to be extra careful. Because as you can see, the whole top of this upper case is metal. And if that positive red wire that we just attached, which is the positive in the circuit, touches that metal, which is ground, which is negative, we're going to create a short circuit. So you really don't want that to happen. So just if you feel the least bit apprehensive about it, cover up your work with electrical tape. You'll be okay. Okay, we just want to make sure this lines up exactly, and it should snap right in. I'm going to pull that one wire through, which is actually the wireless card wire. Just make sure that's in the right spot. Pull it up and through. There it is. The whole case snaps back on. And there's my pile of screws. Time to just put them all back. And what I'm actually going to do is speed up the recording here, because you saw how I took it apart. Use the same screws to put it back together. You don't need to watch it in real time. It will probably get a little boring. And very important, as you can see what I was doing there, attach all the ribbon cables that you unattached in the beginning. Like the ribbon cable that goes to the touchpad. That needs to attach to the motherboard. And any other ribbon cables that are there. It would be really nice if I could work this fast in real time, wouldn't it? Put the heatsink back on. Now I screw the heatsink in a cross pattern, like you're putting on a tire. You don't want to put too much pressure on one side of the heatsink and hurt your processor. So put it on a couple turns here, a couple turns there, just like you're putting on a tire. That's how I put heat sinks back on the processors. Put your wireless card in, put the hard drive in, put the RAM back in, put the covers back on, and we're almost done here. Make sure you get all the screws in, put the CD drive in, held in by one screw. Get the screen back on. Attach the LCD cable. Attach the wireless card cable, which is basically an antenna. The screen usually has an LCD cable and the wireless card cable coming through it. And that wireless card cable goes to the top of the screen to provide an antenna. Attach all the ribbon cables. Now these screws I'm screwing in now are actually holding in the hinges of the screen. I couldn't put these in until I actually had the screen in, otherwise there would be no threads. The hinges actually have the threads in them. And now that that's tight, put the keyboard back on. Make sure it's attached properly. Put the two screws on that hold the keyboard on. Then snap that panel back into place, which we know doesn't have any screws holding it in from the bottom. We know that now. Make sure it's in tight. Make sure that it fits in exactly how it was when you first took it apart. And there you have it. Now let's test it out. Plug the power adapter in. Before we do that, it's actually a good idea to test if there's a short circuit in your work before you plug the power adapter in, because you don't want to mess anything up. So I'm taking the red there, I'm attaching it to the center pin of the power jack, and that black connection is actually hitting a ground point on the other side of the